possible suggestions for your speculation and your consideration. We can even go further. One of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can be stabilized for distribution. You're not aware what nanoparticulate matter is. It's that matter which exists on a scale of 1 times 10 to the minus 9th. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can manufacture materials that have discrete properties that can be controlled by virtue of bioengineering and their physical chemistry. To auto-aggregate, to be able to aggregate in particular areas based upon their biological and or chemical sensitivity. But now we go one step further. Most recently, just a few weeks ago, it was announced that you could then aerosolize nanomaterials. And go one step further, I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, all but the most robust biochemical filters that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, can be then uptaken into the vascular system to create clumping, can affect the vascular system of the brain, or can directly diffuse into the brain space, and these can be weaponized. And they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such, the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. How much of this material would I need? Take a look. This is the front of my pen. This amount of nanomaterial, if be able to maintain and sustain with regard to its deliverability and aerosolization, could in fact affect all of you, or based upon where I come from, New York City, all yous. Look at this. Look at this. I'm carrying that material. Did you see it? Would I have to lug a giant room? No, I wouldn't. And what if, in fact, I utilize some form of an unmanned aerial device or unmanned ground device as a delivery vehicle? Something like a drone or a bug. Could I do something with that? But let's keep going. Could I also utilize a whole host of devices to be able to affect individuals close in, for example, during interrogations, during social engagements, during human terrain team engagements, or more remotely, in a room, in a theater, an airplane, a bus, a store, in a mall? The answer is increasingly yes. So this then represents for us both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that increasingly what we find is that neuroscience and technology is relatively easy to obtain. Many of the things that I've just spoken to you about are viable and obtainable directly to the consumer or directly to the scientist. We also know that many of the products that are available direct to consumer can be easily modified to create things that have a much higher weaponization potential. But more than that, we also recognize that there are dedicated efforts on the part of nation states and even groups of non-state actors, and increasingly virtual nations that are using virtual currencies to fund research efforts in these areas. I'd like to think that I'm a smart guy talking to a bunch of very intelligent individuals, but let's face it, we're not the only smart people in the world. And if we're thinking this way, there are plenty of other people who are thinking this way too. Some of them are our allies, some of them may be our competitors, and some of them are combatants and hostiles. This is, in fact, the reality. We recognize that the goal, particularly among the actions of the United States and her allies, is to fight for right and honor, but to keep our own honor clean, to take the moral high ground, if you will. And indeed, that's been the case in the majority of the United States engagements throughout our history. However, one of the things that may creep up here is that there's something of an abrogation, a prohibition, a proscription against engaging this type of research and its possible translation in the civilian sector. You heard earlier in the very nice introduction that Captain Bender afforded me that I've had the opportunity to work with the European Union Human Brain Project, specifically as a task leader for dual-use brain science. One of the considerations that grew out of that was that absolutely none of those projects in the Human Brain Project, again, a multinational effort, can and should be uptaken into warfare, intelligence, and national security agenda. That's viable enough. The idea there is that these things should be used for only peaceful means. However, this also creates a challenge. And the challenge is simple. If, in fact, I choose not to train in particular ways, I choose not to train 3 days a week, if, in fact, those individuals who may choose to then conflict with me will then train in the ways that I do not, and train on the days of the week that I will not, they may opportunize a select advantage. What do we do? again, I think it becomes at least a problematic issue for discourse because we recognize that in many cases the civilian sector not only is not amenable to engaging in this type of research, certainly many are, but in some cases should not engage in this type of research for those very proscriptions that I alluded to momentarily. However, the question then becomes, how do we appreciate the international challenge, risk, and threat that the advancements of the brain sciences and cognitive sciences offer for global weaponization, with the brain as the next battlescape? Clearly, it defines some type of a solution space, and there have been those that have posited, myself included, that there should be more directed, more detailed, and more dedicated government efforts in this particular domain, so able to advance the brain sciences ways with sustainable funding to understand what the potential risks and threats are, and to develop a stance of preparedness. This becomes increasingly important when we take a look at those countries that have notable and identified programs of high level of investment of GDP and or other levels of economic investment to advance the brain sciences in those ways that are either directly usable or have some, what I would call, explicit dual use capability. An important consideration that I want you all to bear is that current estimates based upon trend analysis is that by 2025, greater than 50% of research, development, test, evaluation, and possible use of brain sciences in general will occur outside the West. Outside the West. Furthermore, we understand that there has been a directed effort in China to be able to engage the current and future 5-year plans, to be able to advance brain science in those ways, to be able to have a higher level of gravitas with regard to the research, its capability, and its translation in medicine, and other agenda, inclusive possible dual use and direct use within warfare, intelligence, and national security. This creates opportunities for research tourism, medical tourism, and market capture. And again, that market capture can be leveraged as economic warfare in terms of being able to destabilize the global market and the global economics that is relevant upon this form of bioscience and technology. We also recognize that these things are being used for military applications. Certainly, there are directed opportunities and directed agendas for doing that within China. We also recognize that there have been activities and directed initiatives in the former Soviet Union that have now been translated and perpetuated